Welcome to Breaking Barriers with R&D, your direct line to Randy Dowdy and David Hula, here to help fellow farmers unlock the potential in their fields. Are you looking to implement best practices that maximize ROI? You've come to the right place. Real value, real yield, real ROI. Breaking Barriers with R&D starts now.
Well, welcome to another episode of Breaking Barriers with R&D. Randy, it's a great pleasure. We gotta thank our premier sponsor, that'd be BASF, to help put this episode on. But just to have a chance to come visit with you, even though I'm in the sunny side of Virginia and I can see some sun shining on your face, so I'm sure you got everything done. You're just kicked back right now.
Well, I took Easton to school this morning. I chatted with you for a few minutes on the way to school, and Easton always likes to hear King David's voice, so we try to make his day. Get started off some days that way, but we do have sunshine. We need some rain. We finally got a little bit of rain, 3 or 4 tenths. It don't go far, but it was much appreciated for sure. Took some pressure off the pivots. Pivots are running nonstop in the area. David, I mean, we've got corn that is 3-leaf stage at 300 GDU, range to 900 GDUs. So there's corn all over the place. Dry land, non-irrigated, really could use some water for sure. We're still in the 80s. We've touched 90 a couple times, 60-degree nights. So we're accumulating heat for sure. And there's some people, I saw some burn on some fields where people have side dress. It looks like they were doing it with a side dress rig, and they splattered some leaves pretty hard. But it's warm and heat units are accumulating fast. And I know for most of the audience, they're sitting there saying, Phil, we ain't even through planting. What are they doing in Georgia? Planting in February? Some of that happens, but most of it happened, first 2 weeks of March. But we just accumulate heat really, really fast.
Yeah, well, we had been dry too. Now, obviously, you can tell me I'm not in my studio right now. I'm in one of my offices. I'm in the pickup because we're at the Western Farm. My goal was to have an easy day and start spraying. Do some bicep and some glyphosate and some salvo, because we finished up Saturday. We had a good day, Dowdy. It's not often I have those kind of days, but we did 184 acres, 16-row planter. And, that's not so impressive, but we also did a 45 different hybrid variety trial on that same day. And, we got, of course, pioneers lined up, got some of their new premier genetics. And then we got some of Dynagrow and, the wing, got some decab. And I got a friend up in Delaware. I even have some Beck's corn in my hybrid trial. Never thought we'd be seeing some Beck's around here, but yeah.
That Beck's stuff. I mean, we know where some of that germplasm comes from.
That's right. Well, Barley keeps telling my nutrient guy, because, they give away pickups. Well, they don't give anything away. You just got to buy enough. And he said, Dad does need a new pickup. So maybe he's going to try some Beck and get a pickup. But corn is, like you said, I mean, I don't have corn as far along. We're at 295 GDUs is the furthest along. So we're coming along right now. Emergence. I know last episode you said, hey, Dave, if you have good emergence, you were going to go, oh, here we go again. But we had 10 days of just great plant weather, no rain. We were losing sleep because we weren't rained out, and it allowed us to finish. And I'm one that says I like to take 2-3 weeks to plant my crop, because I don't know if I picked the right window, but we got it all done in 10 days, and that was a good feeling. That doesn't happen often, and corn is coming up. I'm trying to get it sprayed before it does come up. So that's kind of where we are in Virginia.
Good deal. So you mentioned emergence, and you mentioned you planted in 10 days. Now, everybody in this group knows who I'm talking to on the phone. Anybody that's listening to us, you're not the king for no reason, right? So describe to me emergence on some of those fields. Tell me what you got. Be honest. I'm asking the right question, David. A long time ago, you said, "I'll ask you anything you want to know as long as I ask the right question." So, how did some of those fields that you've had good history on for high yield, how are they emerging?
Yep. All right. So on the two fields at the home farm, the western farm, they hadn't come out yet because we just finished planting those. But on the western farm, we had one row had three emergers come up after the 10 GDU window or somewhere in that range because we were like 10, 12. And then I had two other rows that had two. So Dowdy, that's five that came up after, or two rows had two, so that's four plus the three. So that's seven that came up outside of a window that I feel pretty good about. That corn just came out. Now we did a little extra to it. We graded the seed. One of the things that we take pride in is trying to make seed similar because back the guys that used to grow corn years ago, remembered when you bought seeds, man, you got R23s or you got R21s or F14s, F16s or whatever size because we had plates and we had to have that. So we did that portion. And I think, I don't think, I just know some of the products that we're putting in are helping speed up the germ. And that's allowed because we had the heat, no rain. That corn came up. So it's not as good as 2 years ago, but it's better than 4 years ago. Let's put it that way.
Let's quantify that. What was 2 years ago?
2 years ago, we only had four that came outside of, and that was in the whole 16 row pattern, the whole planter pass.
So you're telling me that you're there looking at the plants as they emerge, and you're inspecting every row, the whole width of the plant, and you're assessing and counting how many plants are waiting in the ground for whatever reason, and they haven't emerged with you. You're checking the whole width of the plant.
16 rows. Yes, sir. Because that's, as a grower, each row is individual. Dowdy, I think we've talked about making sure T handles might not be in the same hole because if one's, depth or whatnot, and then checking every row allows you to know what the planter's doing. Now, will we take that, hand shelling the ears? I don't know about that, but I wanted to see what the emergence was because we have spent a lot of time trying to make sure things are right. And just as growers themselves, it's nothing. One of the things that I've heard you talk about time and time again is V press wheels. We run stage 2 closing system. So therefore, we're controlling some of these obstacles that have caused inconsistent germ depth.
David, there's no doubt about it. And I just wanted the audience to hear, I knew what the answer was before I asked the question. But if they're not paying attention, I'm going to revisit it one more time. You are assessing, now granted,
Yep.
You didn't have a lot of acres to go back and maybe make some corrections on because you got everything planted in a 10-day window. So you probably didn't have a lot of corn emerge before you were completely through planting, or were you?
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, we didn't have a whole lot.
So
correct.
If you had caught a problem, though, if you had discovered that there was a problem by looking at the whole width of the planter, now maybe not all of your acres would be in the same position, the same problem. Unfortunately, there are people out there that do not discover problems until after the fact. And if there's time to not have all acres affected by it, then that's a good thing. So sometimes it's not all bad to get across the 3 or 4 week window. But I know you well enough that, you check daily. I'm sure you check multiple times daily. You didn't just leave the shop, get it set the first day and call it good. And as long as the planter returned, you let it. I'm sure you were checking throughout, but you're trusting and verifying that what your eyes told you at planting is coming to reality, I assume, with how it's emerging. And David, you mentioned V press wheels. I was in Michigan this past week planting, and we got a planter there with a lot of technology on it, and we're vetting it. And I looked at that planter and other planters, and the V press wheels, they just drive me nuts. And I challenge everybody that's listening to you and I, or reading about this, go out while the corn is young. You won't be able to see it 3 or 4 or 5 weeks from now very easily. Go out there either while it's spiking or when it's emerging or 2 or 3 leaf stage. And, hopefully you're doing it spiking and just assess each row. Because, David, I find constantly that those V press wheels, while they may be centered or get centered with a scratch test or centered when you first start planting, they just won't stay that way. And I had a John Deere guy tell me that was out there that's with corporate. He's a really good guy. And we were out there and we were going over the planter, and there was 3 or 4 technicians, and, there was some horsepower in the field. And I don't mean green paint, some horsepower from the JD side, right? And I said, fellas, here's some of my struggles. And we were looking at it, and I told him, I said, these are some of the challenges I think farmers are having across the country. And the one of the head guys there looked at me, and he says, you know what? I can't unsee this now. And I said, good. You don't need to unsee it. And if farmers will go out in their field, I think they'll have the same thing. If they could stop that planter with it in the ground, move 10 feet forward, stop it from where it's rolling, walk behind it, look at those V press wheels. Are they perfectly centered? They have a tendency to walk left and right. That bolt, the way they're designed, they just will not stay centered. I don't care whose it is. I've tried them all. Don't want to say that I know everything, but I've seen a bunch of this, David. And I just see a lot of people leaving a lot of yield on the table because those V press wheels won't stay centered. And we know what happens behind them. They leave a little ridge. And if there's a ridge there, for all that we do with the block test and setting depth and trusting that the T-handles are all in the same spots to create 2 inches, the V press wheels then screw all that up potentially, because if they're not centered, that little ridge will not be directly over that seed. And that's problematic. Now we're changing depth up to 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. And there's no way, David, they're going to merge at the same time. And there's no way they're going to yield the same amount. It's just not going to happen. So why leave that on the table? And we were up there, and I went and looked at the planter up there, and we were seeing corn that had sprouted. It wasn't far from coming up, and we went and looked at the planter that was actually doing the planting. It was 2 or 3 days removed at that point. And 5 out of 24 rows, David, 5 out of 24 rows, the V press wheel on one side was actually running in the furrow.
That's 20%.
David, that's 20%. And I don't, how many planter variability checks have you and I done where we took the whole row, shelled every ear that you mentioned earlier? You took every ear, the 1/1000 acre by row, took it to yield by row. And as you said, each row is an individual, right? You treat each row as if it's its own row and producing income for you. And then you took and did the math. I mean, I remember 190 bushel swings across the width of a planter before. 190 bushels. But just how many times did we see 100 bushel swings, David, when we did this all over the country? When I came up with the planter variability test and created that exercise for people to go through, how many bushel swings have we seen?
No, I mean, that 190 is probably one of the bigger ones.
Sure.
But then I would say the average was closer to 75 to 100. And the best one I saw outside of myself was a guy in Iowa, and they spent a lot of time on a 12-row planter and in the Total Acre group, and he only had 27 bushels. So I don't know that you're going to do a whole lot better than that, because I haven't done much better than that myself. Not to say that we're perfect, but I do know these are things that, like you said, growers can assess this now. I mean, if you're the guy that's planting, you don't have time to do it, but after the season's over, you need to be walking out there and checking. Because one of the things that I like to go back and do is see how things have progressed, and is there something that I could have done to do better? And if it's just a simple change of your closing system, now you can evaluate it and find the rows that did well. And then this is the exercise that you're talking about, the planter variability, but just compare a row that did well to a row that was not properly set. And then you can say, well, heck, if I had a better closing system, look at what the chance of me making more revenue, because, we don't have a chance to just spend dollars and throw money away at this market price where we are today, but they have chances to do better. And I know that's, time, attention to detail, one's level of acceptance. Some people's level of acceptance is much tighter than others. And I know
Well,
I'm
David,
looking at one right now.
when you got service to debt or debt to service rather, um, and the margins are already tight and the bank's already staring you in the face and saying, should you be farming? And you're questioning taking revenue that it's going to be put at stake and no guarantee that you're going to have return. Man, we owe it to ourselves to be responsible, to put our best foot forward. Let's trust but verify that these are happening. And how many times does the V Press will do this in a day, David? Think about how it's centered in.
On my dirt, it would just run like this because it's nice and smooth and mellow. What are you talking about?
I hear you. That's because of the poor warrior, right?
That's right.
But honestly, it moves. And David, you have adjustment there, and you got an oversized hole with a bolt in it. I don't know anybody that's welding it. So they want the adjustment, and it don't stay. And I don't know who's going to come up with this, but I'm going to throw it out there. It's almost like it'd be nice if there was a true laser that would come in the middle of the seed tube that could point rearward when you turn the switch on, just so that you could verify that the V press wheels were staying centered. Wouldn't that be cool? A laser or something that would shoot. I mean, wouldn't that be a cool thing just so a farmer could verify that it's staying that way and staying centered, a quick reference point? And then you trust in it and you verify it. But when you do the math, though, David, just say 100 bushel for easy math, 100 bushel swing on 20% of the rows, and you multiply it times $5 corn that we hope to sell it for, right? Or greater. David, it ain't hard to figure out. You're leaving a lot of money on the table. I mean, you can't claim seed. You can't say that yield variation at that point is solely coming from rainfall variation from row to row or sunlight variation from row to row. Now it goes back to emergence. And what is it that we could do to control that? So, as I've said many times, it is controllable controllables. But you did mention something earlier. You said two-stage or stage two closing system. I know what you meant. A two-stage closing system. And tell me why you gravitated to that, David. I know that with John Deere, you played with a lot of technology, but there was one thing you wouldn't give up in your planter upgrade. Kind of give us an idea why. I know me and you helped beta test, two-stage closing systems at the very beginning, but why have you stuck with it?
Well, the one thing, I mean, at the beginning, when we first got into cotton, we started using the Dawn curve tine, which were actually AccuPlant. And then they got bought out and they became Dawn curve tine. And I thought that was a great closing system. But again, it's a V press wheel system, but they were curve tines, and they kind of help break up sidewall compaction. Not that we were trying to create it, but if we do accidentally create it, we need to break it up. And then like you mentioned, we had a chance to beta test this two-stage closing system, which is a disc blade, and now we prefer to use the ones that are spoked, that are serrated, as opposed to the smooth, and then it's got some packing wheels on the back. The advantages of that for me is, first and foremost, they're staying centered because they're bolted on. They don't have places to wiggle to the left or right. They got airbag down pressure, and the first stage is helping it closes a trench, but then it also is breaking any sidewall compaction if you accidentally created any. Now, if you're going out there when it's extremely wet, you might not break it up, but if we had a little bit too much down pressure with our hydraulic downforce, to make sure that we had a firm V so we're not getting dry dirt fall in the trench, then we might want to break it up. And then the second stage, it's just firming it up. And I like that portion of it as well. It leaves a little bit in the middle to where, hey, we got not as much compaction there, so the spikelet can come out of the ground. And when we've shifted to that, we have really seen our emergence uniformity improve. Now, I don't have numbers. I could go back and look at numbers, but we've been running this two-stage closure system for, I guess, 6 years now, and I unless there's something better, I'm not going to switch back from it. Different pressures based on soil types. And, it also allows me because I want 2-inch germination depth. So this year we were planting 2.25 to 2.5 inches. And not no, we did get a good rain Saturday, and then we had a hard rain 2 days ago. So we'll go back and see how much that soil's compressed. But I'm gonna be anxious to go because I went and checked some before, and then I want to go back and see what we did compression wise. And the other thing about this two-stage closure system, hey, it can work in no-till and or conventional because we run that strip till soil warrior, and that's just like straight conventional for me, just in that strip. So that it's just other options for growers. If you're using any of the curve tines or spoked or twisters, you still got to keep them centered, Dowdy. If it's a V press wheel, you can say, hey, I got a different type, but there's still a V press wheel. And
part of the problem is, David, not everybody listening is the man running the planter. And not everybody that is the principal, that's money's at stake, is the person running the planter and checking it constantly. There needs to be, and I told the guy that I looked at, I said, your operator wants to get acres done. I said, I know it. I can tell by the way, his demeanor is. He wants to get acres done because that's what pleases you historically. I said, now you got to incentivize him to get off that planter and check these rows and make sure that these V press wheels stay centered. And he says, you know what? That's a good idea. I said, because at the end of the day, it's going to pay. It's going to pay. I mean, it's costing you money today that, yeah. I said, you've made decisions. Ignorance is bliss, David. People don't worry about things they don't know. But once they figure it out, it's kind of like the John Deere guy saying, I can't unsee that. And, now he knows, and he's not going to ignore it because obviously there's money at stake, and he's leaving margin on the table. It costs the same amount for the seed. It costs the same amount for the pass across the field. It takes a little bit of time to ensure that it's staying correct.
Well, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the planter, because when Burley and I are the only two that plant corn here at Rimwood, and when he's planting, I'm out there checking behind it. And then if something needs to be, some adjustment needs to be made, then when we're filling up with starter and furrow, then we just hammer that out. And then, the planting process hadn't slowed down a whole bunch. Now, if it's a one-man show, then yeah, it is going to take some time. But the other thing, he's going to probably stop and eat lunch. He's going to stop for dinner. So what I like to do is before I shut down, I run the planter straight through the headlands, park the planter, get out and walk and look. So that gives me a chance to start working on stuff either that evening or the next morning. So people do what people want to do, Dowdy. We have learned that. So
that is a fact. And there's no doubt about it. My dad has said that my whole life. I mean, he was a preacher, and he always would use it from the context of people doing the right thing as God's word said, et cetera, et cetera. But I have kind of slid it over into the farming world too. There's a lot of truth to it in all facets. People do what people want to do. And most of the time, if you can monetarily show them a cost reward benefit, it gets their attention. I mean, you think about precision, for many years, they put on their monitor, dollar value loss from singulation, right? Or skips, that when it started flashing red and $150 or whatever, $100 or $80, I mean, it starts getting people's attention. So, again, it's very important, to check those boxes. And it sounds like to me, based off what you told me, David, the first box is checked. Now, obviously, I was referring to contest fields. You mentioned 2 fields from 2 years ago and 4 years ago. Obviously, everything's planted. your non-irrigated acres, etc. You feel good about most of the farm that has emerged that potentially the first box is checked? Is it going to dictate how you manage going forward?
Yeah, I do. I haven't done the flag test, but I've walked every tracker ground to see where we are. And based on just my perception and having walked fields to identify which ones might be late emergers, we have done extremely well. That the advantage of just holding back, and I'm thinking about just making dollars here by holding back and not planting too early when conditions were a little bit wetter, a little bit cooler. We've managed that. But now we're going back and I'm going and assessing fields to see if they came up uniformly. Because I do the flag trial, you can, after doing it, walking enough, you can see, hey, this one might have been a little bit later emerger, or this one's really late. Then I can not prioritize dollars that I want to say, hey, we're just going to throw the kitchen sink at. But these are fields that, hey, if we have a high degree of confidence that the uniformity of emergence is not going to impact us on a negative side on yield. So we can portion dollars. And if I'm getting an area where, hey, we're getting some rain, some of these tracts of ground of fields might be those that say, hey, let's go ahead and put that next shot of easy drop in nitrogen. Or, BASF being their premier sponsor, we got these certain tracts of ground in these fields. Hey, let's go ahead and put out that pre-Axar fungicide, because we already know we're going to do some Veltima later on in the season. But where are we going to kind of fill the gaps? And I only want to portion those dollars on the fields that have the best chance to recoup those investment back. And I think it's up to growers to understand that and just start walking fields. Because if it's a poor emerging or poor stand field, it's like a pig, Dowdy. And what do you say?
You put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig.
That's exactly right. So why do you want to put some of these fungicides or some of these biologicals that, have a play, but you're not going to see the benefit to those fields that came up much better. And
well, the difference is, Dave, if you quantify this again, let's put money to it. Do you want 70% of your acres? Just say 70% of those plants in that field came up simultaneously, and 30% came up later. And we know there's going to be a yield decline. There's no disputing that. And we know there's a yield decline. With margins the way they are, and we go out and do a $25 herbicide, or we do a $25 fungicide, or we go out there with biologicals, or we go out there with foliar feeding, we go out there with whatever we're going to do, PGRs, whatever it is. Do you want 100% of the plants to respond to that to give you a chance for ROI, or do you want 70% of those plants to respond to it? Do you want 80%? So, again, it's trying to make people think that, it doesn't mean that you don't need to still make yield on those fields, but your chances of making return on investment is when all plants can respond. And that's why when you said you assess what's going on, and you said the end of the season, I think you meant end of the planting season.
Yeah.
So when you made that assessment, not the end of the year.
Yep.
When you make that, when you are looking at the end of the planting season, and now you've got emergence, now you really want to see where you might have challenges, and it might go ahead and convince you that next year I'm not going to have this be my limiting factor again, and limiting my chance of ROI. Now I'm going to take and do my best to eliminate part of this, and you give them the answer. The easiest way is to have a two-stage system, especially if you're not the guy that's checking it all day, every day, and you're not the guy that's running the planter, and you're not the guy or checking behind the planter. A two-stage system, in my opinion, is just more forgiving. Until we know of something else that's better, that's more forgiving system. And there's a lot of them to choose from out there. But to me, that's just a better option when you got a hired hand, or you just don't have time to be that detailed and specific and check it every day. Again, how many times do this in a day? It's going to move. It's just going to move, and it's costing you yield when it does. Just the way it is.
Yeah, it is.
Veltima fungicide out-yields the competition by an average of 7 bushels per acre. But you've never been average. The only competition that really matters is you versus you. And with the performance of Veltima fungicide from BASF, you can take your best results even further. Beat your own record. Get every bushel you deserve. And make this your best season yet with Veltima fungicide from BASF. Always read and follow label directions.
Are you carefully managing fertilizer applications and budget, but still not achieving your yield goals? Micro 500 from AgroLiquid effectively addresses yield-limiting micronutrient deficiencies without the expense of additional applications, nutrient waste, or an unbearable mess. Micro 500's balanced combination of micronutrients is safe to apply and its compatibility is unmatched. Achieve your yield goals with Micro 500 from AgroLiquid. Find out more at agroliquid.com.
So for Dowdy, for the growers that are out here now, most growers are kind of wrapping up let's say they're assessing stands. They're starting to think about, we got to do, what's the next step that we're going to be doing in the field? Now I've talked to Preston Arrington down in Mississippi just the other day, and he's got corn. And he can start to see some of the little shoots of the ears on the side of the stalks. And so he's much further along. But for most of us, like in the Carolinas, the Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and even some in Ohio, they're getting to where they're sprayers. Now, like I said, went to you earlier this morning. Hey, I thought today was going to be an easy day. I was going to be spraying, trying to beat this corn coming up. But growers that have corn that's up and they're thinking about a post-emergence herbicide, didn't Georgia do a trial some years back about, because we don't want to mess up the crop?
Yeah, we did a trial at my farm, David, and we did it many years ago now. I don't know how long it's been. And I wanted to know, is there a right time and a wrong time to spray corn? Real simple. Not what products work best. There's a lot of them out there to control weeds, right? But is there a right time or a wrong time to spray corn and it not affect yield? And one of the things that, my thought process was, if I could understand that piece of it, how late can we spray and it not affect yield? How early can we spray and still get coverage and clean the weeds up and it not affect yield? What's the magic window? And everybody always goes by GDUs, or by growth stage. But David, that's relative in and of itself. Some people identify, is it V6? Once it has 6 true leaves with a collar, are different people interpreting what a collar is? Is it V6 and a quarter, V6 and a half? Is it V6 and 3/4? Is it almost V7? And if there's 100 GDUs between, or 75 GDUs between one collar to the next, that wasn't real scientific for me. And especially if I want to repeat, just think about this for a second, David. When I made high yields, the goal was to duplicate it. And I remember a guy from Virginia said, Randy, anybody can do 350, but now duplicate it. Now you've done something. Dewey Lee, University of Georgia, same thing. Randy, now duplicate it. So I had to understand the science behind it, and I didn't like growth stages. And a lot of herbicides labels are sprayed before this growth stage. And as long as you know how to do that and you do it properly, go forth and prosper. But I felt like, I knew the date we were planning. I knew the date that we were, at a weather station. We were seeing how many GDUs we were accumulating. I just felt like there was a better way, David, to manage a crop. And I felt like if the plant accumulates heat and moves from one growth stage to the next because it's accumulating heat, why would we manage a crop based off GDUs as opposed to growth stages? Because at the end of the day, I have had years where there's sunlight premium years and a hybrid, the same hybrid, have 17 true leaves and another year have 19. Did the hybrid change? No, the weather changed. Something was different. The environment was different. But if I could figure out that I could manage a crop based off GDUs, that was more important to me. So I'm answering your question. I just want to give a little background. We believe that you should manage a crop in all facets by GDUs, because if you made 623 bushels Now your goal is to duplicate that. Is that right, David?
Sure it is.
And if you know how you manage that crop that year, obviously you got emergence, but then there was things you did after emergence to help do that. Now you manage the crop exactly the way you did it that year before. And now at least you know you're impacting the crop at the same physiological point in its life. So if you wide drop, if you side dress, if you water, if you're feeding biology, if you're doing fungicides, do your best to try to do it exactly the same way you've done it before. Now we understand time, weather, farming, life gets in the way of that. But we also believe, David, to answer your question about spraying, we believe that there's a right time and a wrong time to spray a herbicide. And when is yield being determined, David? That's the true question. Now the textbooks tell you when.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you start thinking about, if you're looking at how many rows around on the ear corn you have, the textbooks say between V5 and V7. And that, and I'm not going to disagree with that. That is when you're going to see your final result. But for what I want to know is, when is that first number determined? Because they're going to split. They split between V5 and V7. But when is that operation?
Let's explain that a little bit further. They pair. We don't see odd number of rows around. We see even number of rows around. Now, there are some political parties that might say we'd have odds or that we could have evens. This depends. But I think the universities would say they're all even, right? Any corn expert, farmer out there, I almost went there, but I stopped myself mid-straight. Anyhow, we're going to have even number of rows around. So if we've got even number of rows around, whether it's 14, 16, 18, or 20, or 22 rows around, whatever that number is, at some point they pair. If they're going to pair between V5 and V7, if it takes 225 GDUs for that pairing process to take place, and it pairs at the bottom of the ear to the top of the ear, it starts at the bottom of the ear and stops at the top of the ear. It takes a pairing window of about 225 GUs. That is when truly it's completed. But if they're going to pair, and we know that, then when was it truly the initial row that's going to pair determined? And I've had a lot of conversations with breeders and plant physiologists. I remember going to Iowa State and sitting there, a bunch of graduate students and PhDs, and I'm the only guy in the room that just a dumb farmer. I got a PhD, but it's a post-hole digging degree, right? It's not ag. And I'm asking the right questions when number of rows determined. And I get all the textbook answers because that's easy. That science is completed, right? And then I start asking the question, when are the spikelet rows originally initiated? Because truly, if there's 6 rows, it becomes 12, 7, 14, 8, 16, 9, 18, 10, 20. If that happens, it's really when those rows are first initiated that the rows are being determined. So, David, in mine and your experience, we have learned to manage a crop and get it in balance and to push a crop a lot sooner than V5 to V7. And these are some of the things that we teach in Total Acre. These are some of the things that we teach that we feel like that you can impact yield. We want to stimulate people to join Total Acre, and but farmers have to think about that. V5 to V7 is when the process takes place, but we really need to be impacting the plant much earlier than that. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and we got to be cognizant. We don't want to jeopardize it with a herbicide, because one year I had some Brazilian guys show up. A bunch of farmers, I think Farm Bureau actually brought them, and they wanted to look at some corn, and we had a advanced line trial that was non-GMO, so couldn't spray Roundup on it. We had a regular field planted right beside it that bordered this trial, and we sprayed a herbicide on the before V5, and then when we came back and sprayed the herbicide on the non-GMO corn, there was a little bit of overlap because we didn't have the swath control that we do on the John Deere sprayers that we have now. So we had a little bit of doubling up, but it was also sprayed at a different window. And we saw what you're talking about, when how many growers have pulled an ear of corn and you might have 18 at the butt of the ear, and then it pinches down to 16 or 14 as it goes up. What happened? Was it weather? You know, what took place? Well, we knew what took place because we had that additional herbicide spray. And I'm not going to say it was because it was more, it was because we impacted at the wrong time. And growers need to pay attention to that. And then if you go assess your crop, if you have a field that is got, you can't spray it all. Let's say there's no way you can get it done in the right window. This is where it's important for you to assess the stands. Those that have the best stands, you want to make sure you hit those at the right window. Those that have the worst stands, you possibly do later, or then you go into drops. And I don't know how I enjoy drops. The only drops I want is when I drop tube and fertilizer. So
yeah, hood sprayers. The goal at that point is to not saturate that plant with it. And David, to answer your question, there is a right time and a wrong time to spray corn, and that's part of what we also teach in Total Acre. I hate to sound like a commercial, but you know, our growers are listening to this, I'm sure, and we want to let you know that we think differently, but we really want growers to be successful. And there is a right time and a wrong time to spray. There's no doubt about it that it impacts yield. And you know, V5 to V7 is a lot of the time frame that we got to think about. That a lot of herbicides have windows for spraying. We got to think about impacts on yield. So, David, one thing that I want to say is today we've got a grower that is ready to join us out of Wisconsin. Him and his brother have been a part of Total Acre for many years. We're going to do a little grower spotlight on Dirk and his brother Caleb. But I'd love for you. You've spent some. I've been to their farm. You've been to their farm. You've spent some time with them. Love for you to take and do a little introduction. Then when we come back off break, just for a second, we'll have Dirk on the phone or on the podcast with us. But I'd like for you to give people a little synopsis of what your experience is with the Walters.
It's time for a crop nutrition plan that gets more return from every drop. Starting with Pro Germinator from AgroLiquid, a complete phosphorus fertilizer product that includes nitrogen, potassium, and iron. More than 30 years of research shows that lower application rates of Pro Germinator often outperform other sources of fertilizer. With AgroLiquid's Pro Germinator, you can apply less and expect more. Find out more at agroliquid.com.
Imagine having more days of perfect weather, a combine that's more powerful, or even more soybean bushels per acre at harvest. With Revitec fungicide, you don't have to imagine that last one, because it's proven to deliver up to 9.5 more soybean bushels per acre than the competition. With results like that, it's easy to see why Revitec fungicide is the #1 recommended fungicide by soybean farmers. Visit Revitec.com and talk to your BASF retailer today. Always read and follow label directions.
Well, Randy, it's my pleasure. You see, Dirk Walters in the middle of us too right now, and Dirk and his brother Caleb farm there in Belmont, Wisconsin. And I've been up there walking their corn with the Total Acre group. I've been up there with them, sitting around their fire pit, drinking some beer, and I even chased a blooming white golf ball with them in Wisconsin one time. And you want to get to know some people, go play some golf with them. And Dirk, you know, he wasn't trying to just hit anybody. He just kind of just slow and steady. I think he did better than all of us put together. But I know I won because I found more golf balls than anybody else when the game was over. Because I'm in the woods, buddy.
Dirk, I'm gonna ask a question. I had the pleasure of playing golf one time at a commodity classic event in Arizona with David. And most people that know David very well, he likes to go duck hunting a lot. And I think he even made reference that he was put on this earth to help control the duck population. I think that was a comment I remember hearing him say on one of these podcasts or in passing in the past. But we went and played golf And I can assure you, Randy's not an avid golfer. I used to play a lot back in the 90s, but that's been a long time. And getting old is not for sissies. But me and David and I went and played. I got one question. Were there any bird fatalities when you and him went? Because when David was out there, he was controlling the duck population, but with a golf ball in a golf ball. He hit a duck in the fairway, killed it dead as a hammer.
That's impressive.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm picking up the duck. I'm wanting to take it home to get mounted, and the greenkeeper's about to have a stroke.
And I think I broke somebody's hand, David, when I was there. I told them boys, I said, y'all need to sit up there in that close this tee box. I said, I can just go ahead and tell you, they don't know where this ball's going. And guy was sitting on the golf cart to my right over here, and I mean, I hit that ball and it come off the toe of that club, and I mean, it hit him right square in the hand. I think it ended up breaking it. So don't invite me. Hey, we're not proteges of the PGA Tour, I can assure you.
So, what, Dirk? I talked to your brother a fair amount. What do y'all got going on in Wisconsin now?
Well, we're planting corn now. Caleb's busy planting right now. I guess he's being videotaped, I guess, as well while he's doing it. Doing that and finished up spraying our bean pre this last week, and starting to do the corn pre as well in between, keeping Caleb going.
So you got beans in the ground then?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And is that usual and customary for you guys up there? As a farming group, or just usual for your farm?
For us, I'd say it's at this point it's customary, I guess. I'd say we started doing it back in 2016, something like that. Started planting beans first. But it's going out there and digging. I'm not super happy with what I'm seeing, but we decided to switch to 15-inch rows this year, and we bought a Kinsey planter last year for the main reason of planting cover crop after beans. But we decided to use it for our beans this year, and the struggle is where there's lots of residue, the row unit doesn't get the soybean in the ground as deep as it does where there's no residue. So we got a little too much variability than I'd like to see, but hopefully we've gotten enough rain to keep everything moving along.
Is it a seed to soil contact variability, or seeding depth, or both?
All of the above. So
is it changing down the row or just by row?
By row. So it just depends. If there's no residue, the seed will be 2 and 2.5 inches deep sometimes, and where there is residue, it can be laying on top to 1.5 inches deep.
So
how big did the cover crop get?
Yeah.
So the cover crop was from last year was after soybeans, so it'll be ahead of corn this year, and it got, before we sprayed that, it probably got about 8 inches to a foot tall.
How long has it been dead? Is it dead, or are you planting through it green?
We sprayed it last week, so it's 5 days it's been dead.
And do you have row cleaners?
Yes. Well, not on the bean planter, but on the corn planter, yes.
Okay.
That'll be clean.
If you had row cleaners, though, would that help your situation? Throw that out of the way?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I don't know how well it works on 15-inch rows. I don't know if they fight each other if they're that close together or not. But
I've been here, done this. How much offset front to rear is there between the planters?
There's probably a good 3 feet, I would say.
The more offset you have, the more forgiving it is, but you are going to overload the back row a little more than the other ones, and that may but I found there's different pitch angles by company that they make for narrow rows. And then I've also ran just one row cleaner on one side instead of the two.
Okay.
I've had that way as well. There are some options for managing residue. I know Yetter had some options. Maybe when we talk, I can get you a number of somebody to reach out to. I don't know how they equip with Kinsey, but I know we had options on Deere or Harvest International planters for that on 15-inch rows. But for sure, if you're seeing this now, obviously it just kind of dovetails to what we were just saying, David. If you're in the planting season and you're seeing issues, I see some row cleaners in your future, because obviously if row cleaners would help with that. One other thing I could tell you, just based off a lot of cover crop experience, even with row cleaners, the more dead that cover crop is, the more it seems to be able to release the soil around the roots. When you start to move it, you don't want it to be real turfy if you can help it. You'd rather it be dead, brittle, and it will not be near as turfy on the final product and moving that stuff out of the way. So just food for thought. So,
well, Dowdy, one of the other things that I know Caleb and Dirk do, I mean, they're focused on ROI. There is no doubt, but they also do a lot of testing. And when I was up there, I was seeing corn hybrid trials. I was seeing strip tilling with and without, and then no telling what products they ran through the strip till. So Dirk, why do y'all do all these trials?
Because we're crazy. I don't know. Yeah, we want to learn, trying to figure out what makes it pay the best. And there's so many products out there that kind of get sickening, to be honest. So I'm glad we have you guys to be able to kind of help us sort through it all to figure out, especially when it comes to the biological stuff, what works and what doesn't work. You can spend a lot of money in a hurry, and I know, Randy, you were talking earlier that budgets are tight, and I'm feeling it. I'm sure we're not the only ones, and trying to figure out what makes sense and what we don't need and what we should be using to get a return on our investment.
Well, Dirk, you're exactly right. And if you listen to just the sales pitch or the brochure, everything pays and win rates are 80+%. And, we'll make 500 bushels for us over with. I mean, it's just real simple. And one thing that we try to do is to teach where there's the best environments to push these things and, to get a better chance of ROI, but there are a lot of products. So I applaud you by, seeing what works on your farm. David, we've said it many times, a farmer will never cut out what he or she knows pays. And David and Caleb are walking, breathing examples 100% of, what a farmer should be when it comes to trusting but verifying that these things work on their farm. It's a big deal. And if I'm not mistaken, your brother's doing something with Mosaic today. I mean, I think he's testing some of their products or has tested them in the past. And, he didn't just take our word for it. Y'all didn't just take our word for it. You didn't take the salesman's word for it. You're seeing where the ROI is coming from. So that's a big deal. And I applaud you for doing it. And it takes time. David, you're the king. You planted 45 hybrid draws, to see what you're going to be planting next year, right? You do it as a favor to the seed company and or whatever arrangements you have. But at the end of the day, I guarantee you, David's going to make decisions off of what did those hybrids do on his farm and how many of them's going to make it to his farm next year. So it's a trust but verify situation. So I applaud you for doing that, Dirk, for sure.
So Dirk, kind of, what are the things, 2025, as you well said, man, we're dealing with tight budgets and stuff, but what things are intriguing y'all to say, hey, let's invest a few dollars and try and see what we do want to look at?
Well, I guess starting last fall, this isn't really any product thing, more of a simple tillage. We have done inline ripping in the past, and we last year, I think you saw, David, our corn on corn acres, they really struggled, and I'm sure there's a few things going on there, but I think we always seem to deal with compaction. So we inline ripped our corn on corn acres to try and lower compaction and also clean up the strip a little bit better, cover up some residue come spring. Because after we strip till, seems like we always have, even after, row cleaners on the planter, row cleaners on strip till, we still have residue that comes and covers that row. And you can definitely tell when you go from the field to field, if there's less residue, the corn can definitely grab that heat more and grow faster, which I don't know, I think is a huge deal up here. I know you want to grow or combine wet corn, but when it's above 30%, it gets kind of old, and you start grinding it through the combine. That gets old, but I realize there is a yield benefit to it. But if you can make that crop grow faster just by doing something simple like that to keep the furrow clean, I'd say it's a huge benefit.
So you've done some strip tilling, because walking in your fields, I mean, some of your stuff was just phenomenal, and some of it, we saw that it needed some assistance. But you've also been running a soil warrior, and I don't know how long y'all had a soil warrior or you're partnered with somebody else, but you're running products through that. And why, if a grower is thinking about, do I want to strip till? Do I not want to strip till? What are things that y'all looked at that helped y'all make that decision? And what are you doing now?
Well, since we've been doing strip till since 2013, we got a soil warrior 2 years ago. So what we've seen, since we don't want to do full scale tillage, I mean, last spring we had large rains that you didn't have to drive far to see. I mean, the snowplows are coming out to move dirt off the road, which, I don't know, that drives me insane when I know how much money we spend on fertility. I'm assuming it's going somewhere. And so that's why we're doing strip till, to try and keep as much there as possible. And again, it comes back to, if we can do the least amount of tillage possible, but yet keep that corn growing quickly to collect heat units with the bare soil there, it seems to be a benefit. And we can put our own fertility down with it at the same time. I mean, I remember before we strip tilled, we had guys, hired the co-op, and I got nothing against co-op, but we've found places many times where you come to point rows and there's no nitrogen there. And then just by happen chance, I had walked across the field, and I had noticed, I forget what spread pattern, I think it was like 70-foot spread pattern. There was no fertility the whole length of the field. So I asked for a coverage map, and the whole thing's green. So I'm not saying we don't make mistakes ourselves, but at least when we make mistakes, you know it, and you can go back and fix it. And I'd say that's another reason why we went to strip till, so that we can put our own fertility on and have a better idea where it's going, when it's going.
So who does the strip tilling?
Caleb does all the tractor drive. I'm just the tender guy.
You're the tender guy. You're the guy that keeps things going, though. The important part. So if Caleb gets off the strip, it's his fault. He can't blame you for making a crooked strip, can he?
That's right.
So who drew the short straw on that deal?
What's the short straw?
That's what I'm asking. I was going to see if you would define that. Is it worse being on the tractor, or is it worse being the guy that keeps the tractor moving?
I like being out. I got to move. If I'm sitting in a cab, I'll fall asleep on here too fast. So I got to be out and doing something.
So what Dirk, you said something much earlier. You're going back and you're checking the bean stands, and you weren't happy with it. Is that something, as a support guy, you do? You check behind the planter and see what's going on, and give Caleb some advice, or say, hey, we got to fix this?
That's the goal. I'm not as good at it as you guys are. I'm sure if you make it to our field this summer, you'll find all the mistakes real quick. But yeah, I mean, if you can, the earlier you can catch it, the better it is.
Well, Dirk, you're humble. We didn't bring you on the show because you was the B team or the sitting on the sidelines. You're very humble. You and Caleb both are, but your standards have changed. Your level of acceptance, your timing, that all those things have changed over the years. I didn't know you beforehand, but since I've known you with Total Acre, you're very conscientious and you want to control all the controllables you can, and you try to understand the science behind what you're doing. And that's a breath of fresh air. And we attract early adopters and innovators in the industry for sure. And you know, ignorance is bliss, but it's kind of like I said earlier, when you see something and you know it's a problem and the shoe fits, it's hard to unsee it going forward. Would you agree, Dirk?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely mistakes we've made in the past. If I can do it differently, Randy, there's a lot of things I do differently, especially. Yeah.
I understand. So go ahead.
How much more corn y'all have till you got things wrapped up, or how many more different Pioneer hybrids you got to plant?
Before we started yesterday, we were 30% done. So we got a little bit to go yet.
That was with all beans are done. You got 30% of corn left. Is that what I understand?
Correct. Yep.
Now tell us where you're from.
We're 30% done with corn, so we had 70% of corn yet to go. Beans are done.
Okay, and tell us where you're at for the audience.
Southwest Wisconsin. We're about 30 miles from the river, Mississippi River, east of the Mississippi River, and we're an hour west of Madison, Wisconsin.
Are you in the? I know I met you, and y'all go to several different camps, but are you technically in the Iowa group?
I think we're technically Illinois group, but
Illinois group.
I was usually closer.
I got you. I've seen you at both. I know. I just was curious. Any irrigation, Caleb or Dirk?
That's one of the mistakes I was talking about. That if I could go back and instead of investing in green paint, I'd invest in the valley. Because I put out a little sprinkler one summer in our beans, and maybe it was a fluke. I don't know. And I only had it on for a week. I think it was 23 summer, whatever summer it was, where the corn rallied and it was hot there for a little bit, and then it tanked on us. But that summer, when it was dry, I put a little sprinkler in the beans, and it was significantly better than the rest of the beans. And I don't know.
Define that.
So the rest of the beans probably did 70, and that spot did 90, in the high 90s.
Wouldn't take long to pay for that, would it?
Nope.
It takes longer today, Dowdy, because the prices are cheaper. But yeah,
not the prices of the valley.
And the irrigation prices have went up for sure. They got a.
That's the one issue. You guys can talk about this more than I can, but I didn't realize this until after it was over. But that water was hooked up to a hard water softener, and I was trying to figure out for the life of me why I was going through salt like nobody's business. And turns out, that was softened water. So I don't know if that makes a difference on it, because we have heavy a lot of. I think you guys know this. We're running Bruce's blue water trailer for all of our spray and info, and I don't know if it makes a difference on irrigation water or not, but all that water that got sprinkled out there was softened water. It seemed that I didn't notice a difference, but it seemed to make a difference.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, we've got guys in Idaho that have been part of the group in the past, and they have asked that number one question, high pH water, hardness of water, problems, high salt water. I mean, David, you do a little bit with that just with the river, having to be cognizant of the tides, I guess, or salt levels in the river. So no doubt about it, that plays a role for sure. And you mentioned something about Bruce's water. We could talk a little bit about that even, the pH you're changing the pH of your water. with a blue water system, and just to help cure some of the natural water problems, but also to help try to make herbicides, fungicides, everything's efficacy be optimized. So you're checking a lot of boxes. And if the audience was saying, what is he talking about blue water? I mean, Bruce Reed, his dad, I'm pretty sure, is the one that created that out of Illinois. And they've got a way to change the water. And it's a big deal for farmers, no doubt about it, especially where you're pulling from a different environment from what other people are maybe having problems with. Do you naturally have water in the aquifers nearby underground? Is water available, or is there water restrictions on removal of that water? What's the limiting factor is why you don't have a pivot?
Too cheap.
I ain't gonna let you off the hook, Dirk.
I'm too cheap. We actually have a permit for a well. We did that back in 2019, and I don't think there's a limit, but I haven't studied the DNR rules for Wisconsin close enough.
Well, Rome was not built in a day, and choose a field that you can economically justify it on, something that I would say put it on your thirstier fields, your sandier fields first. And I'm highly confident. I had at one time, David, a challenge I aired with the growers in the very beginning. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. You buy a 40-acre pivot, and if we can't make it pay, I'll buy it back from you. But I don't know if I'm going to do that today. I'm still confident in that I wouldn't have to buy it, but I don't know that they're going to run it like I want to. After we worked with some growers for quite some time, David, where they had accents, I know you know who I'm talking about. I wanted to take over control of all the control of when those pivots ran and when they didn't. It's one thing to have it. Another thing, it's kind of like we talked to Randy Hughes a couple of weeks ago. There's a lot of people out there that, there's a lot of pivots that sit still. And if you got water restrictions or energy cutoff or some kind of issue, then you don't have a choice. I get it, but there's a lot of pivots that are statues in the field, and I don't understand that piece of it for sure. But Dirk, I would challenge you: don't buy paint. Don't buy paint. Buy galvanized, and get you a well in. David, of your acres, how many of them you wish wasn't irrigated now?
I wish I had more. I wish we had bigger fields, took some power lines out, because water's not as big a deal for us, because if we don't take it, it's going in the ocean. So it's because we're pulling out of the river. But it's one of the better investments a grower can do, because how many times does a grower say his neighbor got a shower that he didn't get? That's why they have a better crop. So it controls something. Well, Dirk, man, it's been great having you on. And when I think about pristine locations and just scenic, Dowdy, you get to Wisconsin, you got the rolling hills, and man, they got an awesome facility, grain facility, and just a great operation. Had a chance to visit their families and their parents, and man, they are just some good Christian people. So when I think about farmers around, I'd put them in the top tier of, and it's
and I think you were with me. Do you remember when the kids had made us all a gift and wrote us notes?
Yep.
Was that awesome or what? I mean, the wives obviously played a role in that, but the kids were so thoughtful, so polite, so friendly, and it has been a true friendship. And Dirk and Caleb, I know your brother's probably listening or will. We appreciate you and value you guys being part of the group. You got our access to us, utilize that. You got questions, throw them our way. But really and truly, it's been a pleasure to have you be part of a Total Acre. And one of the best things that I can say, and I hope that you would maybe have a little input, value from Total Acre, not just friendships we develop with you guys, but David and myself have wanted to pay our knowledge forward, and iron sharpens iron. But people have the software, but that network of growers, the camaraderie that's built there, the peer group experience what's been some of the advantages that you've seen from being a part of Total Acre, Dirk?
I think the biggest thing is if you're willing to network, willing to talk to people in the group, you can find out pretty fast what things are working, and you can skip trying to figure it out on your own on a lot of things. And I mean, you're gonna have to test a lot of things yourself, but there's the knowledge base and the computer program that you guys are putting together, I think is very valuable. And the people in the group are it's a huge benefit to learn from others, and people are open. If you're open, other people are open to help you learn what to avoid in the future and what things to that are benefiting them to help their ROI.
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you. And, we know you've helped recruit people. We visited with some of your neighbors, et cetera, over the years. We do appreciate you being part of the group. Any questions that you want to ask David and I live in Memorex that maybe the other farmers could benefit from? David on the spot. I don't see him squirm.
Wait a minute. He's going to pull out his phone and he's going to look at some of the things he's got going on.
Well, I don't know. The one thing that drives me nuts is, and maybe it's just end rows and my level of acceptance needs to be higher, which it is pretty high now that I got 3 kids running around. But end rows drive me nuts when I see compaction. And we got all the fancy stuff on the deer planter, but even with the hydraulic downforce, I've seen rows that are seed be 2.5 inches to 1 inch. Now it does a lot better job than our spring Kinsey planter, but still I've seen, and when it gets to hard spots, and I just don't know how you avoid that, where the grain cart always comes back to the semi or heavy traffic. That's I know we've tried permeate and we tried inline rip in those spots, but it still seems like it's not as good as the rest of the field. And maybe that's just a minor detail you just need to get over, and that's part of farming.
Well, I know a lot of people that will take their rippers, and maybe you might have to go across it a couple times just to kind of break it up. And then one thing that I like to do is start looking at the biology in those areas, because sometimes when you get into the compact areas, I don't have the same quantified earthworms that I do out in the field, just because it is tighter ground, and how one can go and make some adjustments there. And it might be that you do, because I know y'all are trying to do reduced tillage. It might be that you do their inline ripping and then you do some tillage there just to break it all up, and then get a cover crop out there.
I think the cover crop's going to help some too, but there's a better answer to that, in my opinion. Just don't plant inroads. Are they profitable? I mean, the whole, if the American farmer could agree in 1 year to not plant inroads, nobody. Are they profitable? Are they making money? You think about what that would just do to supply in the markets. We could fix this market pretty dang quick, but we couldn't get them all to agree, I'm sure. And I say that in jest, but I think cover crops, obviously deep tillage, controlled traffic pans. I mean, it's not hard to see, down pressure maps, as applied maps, see where equipment ran in the past, and then you got to try to remove it with steel. Hopefully you get a lot of freezing and thawing that helps with that, but there's just a certain amount that don't cure anymore. If you get snow cover before it gets really cold, then that acts like an insulator as opposed to it freezing and thawing. I'm learning that, David. I would never have that experience in South Georgia to talk about, but I'm learning that in Michigan, that, just because it's cold and 0 and 10 degrees, if there's a mat of snow on the ground, it don't mean you're getting that freezing and thawing that you covet to help break some of that up. So we got to get back to some of that, that we really can't control, but I think cover crops is going to help you, but steel. And we've talked about a few products people have sprayed for compaction areas. I know you can probably remember what I'm insinuating there. You may try those at a heavier rate on the inrows. But regardless, Dirk, Any other questions? Anything that you're trying this year that other farmers ought to consider? Any no-brainers?
Caleb would know those answers better than I would. He's got a full list of stuff that we're trying for Total Acre, and I don't remember as well as he does. I just delivered.
How many trials are y'all doing for Total Acre this year?
At least 7, I would say.
7. So not only do you have the opportunity to learn from us and David and, you know, the group and the software, but now you got a chance to learn from the trials and be a part of those. And, you know, we got guys that have been doing the trials that, you know, they add a lot of value back to the group. So we appreciate that.
And they get paid to do it.
Oh, yeah, they get paid to do these trials. I mean, crap, it more than pays for the membership.
Yeah. Well, I think that the segment that we learned with you, Dirk, today is that if we quit planting in rows, we're going to raise the corn price. 2 takes down. I can see what's going to happen now. Breaking barriers with R&D, also marketing advice. Don't plant in rows.
Yeah.
And buy
cover crops on the end row.
Buy a pivot.
That's right.
I think you had 29 bushels, right? Watching that like a 25, 30 bushel swing there. So
Yeah.
that's all right.
Well, hey,
Good
Dirk,
deal.
it was great having you on today. When I got the text that you were going to be on, I was like, oh yeah, now I get to hear him talk some. So this is fun. So yeah,
Thank you for being part of the group. Thank you for being part of the group. We also want to throw another shout out to our premium sponsors, BASF. Thanks for all the sponsors that are part of this. We will be showcasing them coming soon. But more importantly, thanks to all the growers that's been a part of this and that are listening. We appreciate you being a part of it. David, I'm gonna let you sign it off like you always do.
Yeah, well, it was a pleasure to be in on the podcast with you, Breaking Barriers with R&D, and as we're planting their seeds, may God bless them, and now it's their responsibility to nurture them. So stay tuned for another episode of Breaking Barriers with R&D later on.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon for another new episode of Breaking Barriers with R&D. Be sure to like and subscribe, and remember, all episodes are available on Farm Journal TV and anywhere podcasts are found.